Hello, gorgeous people. Happy Monday morning, June 30th. And we are here to talk about the week of June 30th through July 6th. That's right. We are bringing ourselves just to the edge of Uranus moving over into Gemini, which is going to be a huge shift happening next week. We'll get into that. But for this week, we have plenty to talk about, including a Mercury-Pluto opposition and a really sweet Venus-Uranus conjunction at 29 Taurus. So before we get into the transits, know that if you are curious what all of this means for and about you in your life and your specific, unique, beautiful geometric little gemstone of a chart, you can book a one-on-one session with me at 9livesastrology.com or hit the link in the description. All right, here are some of my favorite comments from the past week. On last week's First Light, Mrs. Marina 961 says, I have Jupiter in Cancer natally. Last week, a few $100s were unexpectedly delivered to my bank account from a consumer settlement I didn't even know I was a part of. I screamed, Jupiter, keep going. I expect my cup to overflow. It's been a brutal winter. Well, Mrs. Marina, this is just the beginning, and I wish you a happy, successive 12 more months of Jupiter in Cancer, bringing you all kinds of random money from accounting mistakes and other lawsuits you weren't even sure you were a part of. Also on last week's video, Appalachian Fawn says, my ducks listened with me. Moon, Fortune, Fawn, and Carla appreciate your insights. And I had to share this comment because this is what I was picturing in my head as I was reading it. Tony Soprano and his little ducks. I also got so many comments from other Cancer Moon brothers and sisters. So hello and cheers. I'm happy to have you all here with me. All right, let's take a look at these transits. On June 29th, we have Mercury at 3 degrees of Leo, opposing Pluto at 3 degrees of Aquarius. A few days later, on July 4th, we have Venus conjoining Uranus at 29 degrees Taurus, right before she moves over on that same day into Gemini. Now, just a couple days later, as I mentioned, on Monday of next week, Uranus will move over into Gemini, and we'll talk about that then. We also have Neptune stationing retrograde at 2 degrees Aries on this day. And throughout the week, the moon will move from conjoining Mars in Virgo all the way into Sagittarius, opposing Venus newly in Gemini. Let's talk about this Mercury-Pluto opposition. This really is the first threshold for intensity in a developing storyline, particularly this summer, where the Leo part of the zodiac is building and strengthening against Pluto in Aquarius. I get such a strong sense, not just from this week. This week is the first taste of it, but as we build into August in Leo season, when the sun comes in, solar figures are building in strength. Solar figures are leaders. They are priests. They are teachers. They are institutional figureheads. They are fathers, both literal and archetypal. And there is a sense that the solar figure is growing in strength. Now, I think Mercury opposing Pluto here is the first ping of that. And this is setting us up for Mercury to station retrograde on July 17th at 15 degrees Leo, and it will retrograde all the way back to 4 degrees Leo on August 11th, where it will station direct. So there's a strong sense here of tension between the strong developing solar and the pull of what's going on in Aquarius. Now, there's obviously all kinds of stuff going on in the collective right now, in the world, and I'm not just talking about current events, although there's obviously that too. But there's a really potent sense of some kind of static on the line here, with Mercury in Leo poised to carry on and station retrograde, opposing that Pluto already retrograde in Aquarius. If you are the kind of person who is hyper aware of the energy that's going on and how things are changing from week to week, if you consume astrological media, if you are journaling and reflecting on a regular basis and you have your antenna up and out and you're probing out into the world for information, you're going to be picking up all kinds of transmissions. And they're not necessarily all intentional or conscientious or kind. The likelihood of becoming a conduit for someone else's energy is really strong right now and will only be intensified by this Mercury-Pluto opposition. So be careful. Make sure that you have some good spiritual hygiene, because that Plutonic warping in Aquarius pulling our attention underground, away from the sharpening sense of self and authority that is building up in Leo across the next couple months, and even as far far as summer 2026 through summer 2027, where Jupiter will cross through Leo and bring even more of a vision quest to that part of our charts. So stick with me, Zoomers. I know we're talking about ancient tech here, but if there is static on your line, make sure that you're clearing that out and trying to center yourself back into your own body and your own life and your own sovereignty. That brings us to July 4th, when Venus will conjoin Uranus at 29 Taurus. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the longer storyline that's happening with Venus and Uranus here, because they will conjoin on July 4th at 29 Taurus, but actually because of Uranus's retrograde cycle, they will conjoin again at 29 Taurus on April 23rd, 2026. Now, when it happens again, it won't be as kind as this week's astrology is. This week looks pretty docile in comparison to what happens in April of next year, when Mars and Saturn will conjoin together in Aries and the moon will be joining Venus and Uranus in Taurus. When taken in that context, this transit here this week really looks like a gentle pressure, a whisper, a nudge, a caress to get moving in the direction you know you need to get moving in. Uranus has been doing all kinds of madness and mayhem and instigating and poking and static shocking and electroshock therapying all the Taurus parts of us for the past 8 years. And frankly, I can't think of a sign that would enjoy such a process less than a fixed Earth sign who really wants stability and material consistency. It's really making me think of the process of creating art. When you are in the process of creating every day, just for the pleasure of it, just for the joy of it, just for the daily ritual, just because art is in your bones and in your blood, it can be so comfortable to stay there in that phase. And when it comes time to start displaying your art or showing it to people or getting feedback or even just showing it off and stepping out into an exhibition space, it can feel so overwhelming, and it can even draw up the ways that we arm ourselves against that kind of scrutiny. Once you're in the rhythm of that creating space, it can be really hard to commit to leaving it and actually getting to a space of visibility. But the thing about that warm, soft cocoon of creating and the fear that it inspires, you never really know how the process of putting your art out there, putting yourself out there, is going to change you or what it's going to inspire you or provoke you to do. And that's what it feels like Venus and Uranus together at 29 Taurus are inspiring you to do. And it really looks like this week they are asking you lovingly, like, hey, you want in on this? And next April, they are not asking anymore. They are telling. Now, I think for most people, this Venus-Uranus conjunction is really going to feel like a shift in mood or energetics, or maybe some kind of realization that you're having in your life. But if Venus is your time lord for the year, so if you are in a Taurus or Libra profected year ruled by Venus, this may be some kind of event that's actually happening to you. Now, if you don't know how to find your time lord for the year, fret not. I'm going to be filming and publishing a video about this very soon. But if you're already skilled with profections, know that there may be something specific coming down the pipeline. And I would expect it to be most likely quite positive with both of the benefics well situated. But something that I wanted to bring up, especially if you were born during the day, or if you have a difficult relationship with Venus, or on some Jupiterian lesson vision quest right now, I wanted to talk a little bit about Venus and how she relates to mercy and release. Now, very often when I meet with clients or friends who've lost a loved one after a really long process of grieving, so an extended hospice stay or a chronic wasting away type illness, very often in that person's passing, there is a significant Venusian presence or a Venusian transit being activated. And I can only aspire to speak for what the stars intend, but it often feels like Venus giving a little mercy, a little hug, a little bittersweetness, and some grace to a situation that may have felt very fraught for a long time. This is bringing up the iconic book, Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. And I'm thinking a lot about the ending of that book. Spoilers, skip ahead like 45 seconds if you don't want me to spoil this book from 2007. Also an Oscar-winning movie made more recently, but thinking about a really beautiful affair, a life-altering affair, something that is so pleasurable and gorgeous and beautiful, but that has to come to an end in some meaningful way, in a way that has grace, in a way that feels a little bit like a mercy, but in a way that is acknowledging what is real and sustainable. After Venus conjoins Uranus, she moves into Gemini, and that's kind of the good good news. Now, this story of Venus moving from Taurus to Gemini is a little bit like a bee in spring. So the first few flowers that bee huffs on in spring are like God things. But after all the flowers are in bloom and there's so much to choose from, that bee is moving around from flower to flower, fearlessly following its interests, answering to no one. Maybe we would call that bee flighty. Maybe we would call it flaky, but she doesn't care. So this Venus is really paving the way for Uranus to come into the Gemini part of our charts and muck stuff up. That bee-like curiosity that you may be feeling when Venus comes into Gemini is a sacred thing. And following your curiosity while Venus and then Uranus specifically come into Taurus is going to lead to some really unexpected and revelatory things going on for you in the next 8 years. Now, on the same day Neptune stations retrograde, I don't think this is a hugely important transit for most people, but I think it kind of colors the story because Neptune right now is in Aries, being zealous, being driven, competing with Saturn, the maverick, the outsider. And Neptune right here is like, wait a minute, I forgot something beautiful in Pisces. I gotta go back. I wasn't ready for this war-torn landscape of Aries. I gotta go back. I gotta dive back in the ocean, cool off one last time. Then I'll be ready. Then I'll be ready. Now, the moon for her part this week moves from conjoining Mars in Virgo all the way through Sagittarius, where she will finish out by opposing Venus in early Gemini. Definitely pay attention to what happens when the moon is in Scorpio from early Friday morning, July 4th, all the way through evening on Sunday, July 6th. The moon in Scorpio is stiflingly intense. It is self-deprecating. It is unfortunate. It is grudge holding. So the fact that this moon is opposing what's going on with Venus and Uranus brings in this sense of bitterness, a sense of hanging on to something from the past, some piece of information that while Venus and Uranus may be bringing you this pleasure and this beauty and these experiences that you want to relax into, this moon in Scorpio is hanging on to old archival material and feelings and thoughts and grudges. But something I want you to think about is that bitterness and determination feel very similar in the body. So if you do find yourself somewhere between July 4th and 6th, feeling that bitterness, that little toxic black vial of bitterness seeping in, know that you can adjust your posture very slightly and get to a place of determination or grit if necessary. Definitely do so. Now, here's what I want you to do. Whatever secret little thought is living like a harbored fugitive in your heart when I'm talking about this pleasure-giving, surprising, unexpected twist of Venus conjoining Uranus, 29 degrees Taurus, what's coming to mind? What's your secret hope? Let me know in the comments. Now, if you have to twist it into some coded, secret, super spy, spellcasting language, definitely do that if you have to, but drop it here. And if something nice does happen to you this week, come back and let us all know. All right, we've reached the part of the show where we talk about how I, as a pagan, animist, astrologer, human being, am going to be using the astrology of this week. Now, this Venus-Uranus conjunction, this surprise, life-giving conjunction is happening in my 5th house of children and creation, and I'm in no hurry to make a sibling of my 18-month-old son. So I am thinking of checking myself into a nunnery for the entire week, maybe one of those isolation, sensory deprivation retreats where you go into a cave with no light for 7 days. Maybe that situation where I've seen people bootstrapping bungee cords and a strainer full of ice to the top of their shower so that it turns into like a freezing cold plunge shower. That's me all week. I've also been going through a lot personally, really internal stuff, really reflective stuff that I'm honestly really proud of with Jupiter atop my natal moon in early Cancer. So I've been creating, writing, collaging, making things like absolute crazy with almost no pressure to make sure that it makes sense. But I have been writing my book, I have been collaging, I have been beading, and I'm just rolling with it. I'm not even working out how to connect it with anything spiritual or figure out how it makes sense. This Uranus transit for me has really correlated with my experience going back to art school as an adult 8 years ago. And that process murdered my creativity. And I am in the process of trying to reforge finding true pleasure in being creative after spending so much time in crits. So that's what I'm up to. I'm sure I'll be at the museums. So look on Instagram for that. I think it also could be nice to make a nice meal. So if any of you out there are home chefs or really enjoy the salt, fat, acid, heat of things, or if you have a folder of New York Times recipes that are not so fancy that they're going to require you to buy new equipment, but that they are slightly more elevated than your normal everyday meal prep, that's the sweet spot. All right, lovely people, you know what that sound means. I'm almost done with my coffee. And so we must be done with the show. I hope you have a lovely, life giving, beautiful, surprising, buzzing little bee of a week. And I'll see you all next Monday.